Um, Imagine you are just standing there right in front of a 200-year-old quilt in a museum,
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is quite a visual.
right? You are not just looking at a blanket. I mean, you are looking at the exact moment some stranger's hand cramped up, maybe causing this slight uneven pull in the thread.
Yeah, exactly. You can literally see the history.
You really can. You are observing this slow, quiet chemistry of natural dyes, like how the bold madder reds have surrendered to time, fading to a soft, whispered pink.
While the indigo blues have just stubbornly held their ground.
Yes, 100%. You are absorbing tension and texture and history
Yeah.
all in a single glance. So welcome to Season 3, Episode 6 of Threads of Tomorrow Crafting Textiles.
It is great to be here for another deep dive.
And we are so excited to get into this one. This deep dive is brought to you by omemy.com. That is spelled omemy.com, and it's pronounced omemy.com.
Absolutely. So what is our mission today?
Well, today we are exploring the absolute fundamental starting point of any textile craft journey. We are going to slow things down, step into the studio, and basically walk through this process like a story.
Which is so needed, because if you are an absolute beginner in design and you find yourself staring at a blank canvas with a head full of ideas, but, no idea where to put your needle first, you are definitely in the right place.
Oh, I mean, the blank canvas is just the most intimidating place in the world for a beginner.
It really is. You look at these magnificent, intricate textile pieces like garments with breathtaking silhouettes or tapestries with complex woven motifs, and it just seems impossible to fathom how the designer took that very first step.
Right. It feels like they must possess some kind of, I don't know, magical intuition or something.
Exactly. But the truth is far more grounded, and frankly, it is much more accessible than people think.
To understand how a designer actually begins, I want to bring you, our listener, into the world of a design student. So let's call her Sheena.
Okay, Sheena, I like it.
Yeah. So Sheena is incredibly passionate. Like she spends her weekends feeling the weight of different linens at the fabric store, and she has these big dreams for her career.
We all know a Sheena, or we were Sheena at some point.
Totally.
Yeah.
So recently, she decided to enter this international contest for young textile craft designers. It is a massive opportunity, right? The kind that can literally launch a career.
Oh, absolutely. Those contests are huge.
But immediately she hit a wall because the contest rules state that designers must create their textile craft products, quote, as per the design brief.
Ah, the dreaded design brief.
Right. So Sheena sent this somewhat frantic email to her mentor, the celebrity designer Pamela Krishnan. And Sheena's question was really simple, but desperate. She just wanted to know, what exactly is a design brief and how do we even start?
I mean, it is a question every single designer has asked at some point. A design brief is essentially the guiding mission of your project.
Like the rules of the game.
Exactly. It is the specific set of requirements, the boundaries, the target audience, and the overall goals you need to achieve. It is the literal problem you are being asked to solve through textiles.
So how did Pamela answer her?
Well, Pamela Krishnan wrote back to Sheena with this brilliant, highly actionable piece of advice. She told Sheena not to just sit at her desk waiting for a lightning bolt of inspiration.
Which never works anyway.
Right, it never works. Instead, Pamela instructed her to get active, to start collecting swatches, pictures, articles, and physical objects.
Okay, that makes sense. Gather the ingredients.
Yes. But specifically, she told Sheena to gather these from both primary and secondary sources of information that apply to the contest's brief.
Okay, I am looking at Sheena's situation right now, and I see a potential trap here.
What kind of trap?
Well, the brief for this contest is a thematic one. It is called Finding Light in Dark Times.
Oh, that is a challenging one. Very abstract.
Right. So if I were an absolute beginner, my very first instinct would be to just sit down and try to sketch something from my imagination. Maybe like a literal yellow sun embroidered on a black background.
Which is very literal and usually very flat.
Exactly. But Pamela's telling her to stop drawing and start collecting. I assume Pamela is trying to get Sheena to look at how other people have interpreted light and dark.
She is, yes.
But throwing terms like primary and secondary sources at a beginner, I mean, that sounds very academic. It sounds like high school history class. Let's demystify this for the listener.
I agree. It can sound overly formal.
So what is the actual tangible difference between a primary and a secondary source when you are just standing in a craft room holding a pair of fabric scissors?
To demystify it, we really have to look at the raw, unfiltered world of primary sources first. In the simplest terms, a primary source is a direct first-hand experience.
Okay, firsthand.
Yeah. You are encountering an object, an environment, or a material directly. Without a single other person's interpretation or editing or opinion getting in the way, it is just you and the raw data of the world.
Oh, I see. So reverting to the museum quilt I mentioned earlier, the primary source isn't that little informational plaque next to the glass case.
No, not at all.
The primary source is the quilt itself.
Correct. The plaque is someone else's summary. The quilt is the primary source. By looking closely at the actual quilt, Sheena can gather raw intelligence.
Like the fading dyes and the stitching.
Exactly. She sees the uneven stitching made by human hands over 2 centuries ago. She observes firsthand how the natural dyes have aged, but, primary sources are not just confined to historical archives or museums.
Oh. Where else can she find them?
Nature. Nature is perhaps the most massive primary source available to us.
Oh, I love that. Give me an example.
Okay, consider Sheena going for a walk right after an autumn rain. She looks down at the wet concrete sidewalk and observes the fallen leaves. She notices how the water completely changes the physical properties of those leaves.
Oh, yeah. Everything looks so different when it's wet.
Right. The moisture intensifies the dark browns, making them look almost like heavy, wet charcoal. And at the same time, the water makes the yellow leaves look entirely translucent, like fragile stained glass stuck to the pavement.
Wow, that is so vivid.
That direct observation of color saturation, transparency, and overlapping organic shapes, that is gathering primary information.
That makes so much sense visually. But textile craft is so deeply physical, right? Can a primary source be something you actually generate yourself, rather than just something you observe in the wild?
It absolutely can. And honestly, for beginners, hands-on experimentation is one of the most vital primary sources you can cultivate.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, if Sheena sits at her work table and physically starts blending different colors of embroidery thread together, she is generating primary knowledge.
Because she is doing it herself.
Yes. When you physically pull a thread through fabric, your brain is doing something entirely different than when you merely look at a picture of stitching. You are firing motor neurons. You are building spatial awareness.
Right, you are literally committing the tension of that specific thread to muscle memory.
Precisely. You feel the resistance of the weave. You see how the ambient light in your specific room catches the sheen of the silk. Nobody told you this information. Your hands and your eyes abstracted it directly from the material.
I see the value in that so clearly.
Hmm.
It is basically the difference between reading a weather report about a storm and actually standing outside, feeling the temperature drop, and letting the rain soak your clothes.
That is a perfect analogy. The first-hand experience builds a really visceral, structural understanding in your brain.
But okay, here is the practical wall Sheena is going to hit. She is a student, you know. She is probably living in a small apartment, working on a tight deadline for this contest.
Which is the reality for most beginners.
Right. She cannot just book a flight to a specific textile museum in London to look at 18th century weaving techniques. And she can't wait around for an autumn thunderstorm to observe wet leaves if her contest entry is due in July.
Very true.
Her access to primary sources is severely limited by geography and budget and time. I mean, if she relies solely on what she can physically touch and see in her immediate vicinity, her design vocabulary is going to be incredibly narrow.
That is the exact limitation of primary sources. And frankly, it brings us to the crucial second half of Pamela's advice, which is secondary sources.
Okay.
Yep.
The other side of the coin.
Right. If a primary source is your raw, direct experience, a secondary source is information that has been filtered through someone else's lens first.
Filtered?
Yes, filtered. Another human being has already processed the raw data, interpreted it, edited it, and packaged it for you to consume.
Give me a concrete example of this filter in the context of Sheena's craft room.
A textbook is a classic secondary source.
Okay, a textbook.
Yeah. If Sheena buys a book demonstrating 10 different applique techniques, she is relying on a secondary source. The author of that book has made countless decisions on Sheena's behalf.
Decisions like what?
Well, the author decided which 10 techniques were the most important to include. They decided how to illustrate the diagrams, and they chose the specific vocabulary to describe the process.
Oh, I see. So it is not raw anymore.
Exactly. A YouTube tutorial is another perfect example. When Sheena watches a master crafter demonstrate a complicated patchwork block on video, she is getting a secondary experience.
Because it is on a screen.
Because the video creator has edited out their mistakes, they have set up artificial lighting to make the fabric look a certain way, and they have chosen a specific, curated camera angle. The rawness of the craft has been filtered through the creator's editorial choices.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because this raises a really tricky question about how we define that filter.
Oh, what do you mean?
Let's go back to the walk after the autumn rain.
Yeah.
If I am out walking the park and I see those beautiful translucent yellow leaves on the wet sidewalk, and I take out my phone and snap a photograph of them, I created that image. So isn't that photograph a primary source?
Oh, this gets to the very core of how beginners should evaluate their research. It is an amazing question.
Well, thank you. I try.
It is entirely about relativity. It is about the distance between the observer and the subject. If you are the one walking in the park, feeling the cold air, smelling the damp earth, observing the leaves, and you take that photo to document your own direct experience, then for you, that observation and the resulting photo act as a primary experience.
Okay, because I was physically present in that environment. My brain connects the photo to the physical memory of being there.
Precisely. However, if Sheena is sitting at home, miles away, scrolling on her phone, and she comes across your photo of those leaves on Instagram or Pinterest.
Oof. For Sheena, it's different.
Yes, for Sheena, that photo is definitively a secondary source.
Because she is missing the sensory context.
Hmm.
She is only seeing what my camera captured.
Exactly. She is seeing your specific interpretation of the leaf. She is seeing the specific angle you chose to shoot from, which probably hides the rest of the dirty sidewalk.
Right, I cropped out the trash can.
Exactly. She is seeing the way your specific camera lens processed the light. Perhaps you even applied a digital filter to make the yellow tones appear warmer than they were in reality.
Guilty as charged.
We all do it, but she is receiving the information filtered entirely through your creative and technical choices. She isn't experiencing the leaf. She is experiencing your photograph of a leaf.
Wow, okay. That distinction is incredibly helpful. It is all about understanding who made the choices before the information reached your eyes.
100%.
Before we move on to the most important part of this journey, how Sheena actually translates this giant pile of primary and secondary sources into a winning contest entry. I want to take a brief pause.
Sounds good.
If you are an absolute beginner in design, or simply a craft enthusiast who loves unpacking the mechanics of creativity, you do not have to do this alone. You can join the amami.com WhatsApp community.
It is a great place to hang out.
It really is. And all you need to do is scan the QR code that is right there on the poster for this show. The community is called Devi the Curious, and it is just a fantastic, welcoming space designed to keep you informed about all the new deep dives, blogs, tools, training sessions, and live workshops that we curate specifically for our niche audience.
It is honestly an invaluable resource for connecting with others who are on the exact same learning curve as you are.
Yeah, so again, just scan the QR code on the poster to join Devi the Curious. So let's get back to Sheena's desk.
Let's do it.
We have solved the mystery of the sources. She understands the raw truth of the primary experience and the filtered breadth of the secondary experience. She has spent a week gathering.
She has done her homework.
She really has. Her desk is covered in wet leaves she brought inside, thread gradient samples she stitched herself, library books on historical garments, and a tablet full of curated photography.
A beautiful mess.
But here is the critical hurdle. Sheena has a pile of stuff, and she has a brief that says, quote, "Finding light in dark times." What is the actual mechanism for turning a pile of leaves and books into a textile design?
This is where most people get stuck.
I mean, my guess would be that she just looks at the things she likes and tries to replicate them. Like she sees a nice leaf, she embroiders a leaf onto a jacket.
Yeah, that is the exact trap most beginners fall into, and it usually results in very flat, uninspired work.
Oh, really?
Yes, because the goal is never replication. The goal is extraction. Sheena is collecting intelligence.
Intelligence. Like a spy.
Exactly like a spy. When she looks at the primary leaves or the secondary historical quilt book or the YouTube tutorial, she needs to actively dissect them. She is hunting for specific elements hidden within those sources. She needs to isolate the colors, the textures, the motifs, the objects, the words, the phrases, and the iconography.
Oh, wait. This connects perfectly to what we explored earlier in the season.
It does.
In Season 3, Episode 2, celebrity designer Pamela Krishnan gave us a masterclass on the elements of design.
Yes, she did.
She taught us that the fundamental building blocks of any visual craft are line, color, texture, and shape, or silhouette. So Sheena is looking at her sources to deduce which of those specific core elements are suitable for answering her brief.
You nailed it. Let's walk through the actual physical process of how Sheena does this, using that Finding Light in Dark Times brief.
Yes, please. Give me this step by step.
Okay, because the theme is abstract, she needs sources to ground it in reality. For a primary visual source, Sheena takes a walk at dusk. She stands on a street corner and directly observes a single street lamp turning on against the twilight.
Okay, so she is gathering raw intelligence.
Exactly. She notes how the lamp creates a sharp, warm yellow pool of light. But she also notices that the shadows at the edges of the light aren't just black. They are a deep, fuzzy, heavily textured blue-gray.
Oh, that is a great observation.
That is her primary visual intelligence.
She has the raw sensory data, but
Hmm.
she still needs Brett, so she turns to a secondary source.
Right, so she goes to the library and reads an anthology of poetry written during challenging historical periods.
Books are always a great secondary source.
Always. She reads verses about light breaking through oppressive darkness. She is consuming someone else's emotional interpretation of the theme, carefully packaged into words and metaphors.
Okay, so she has the physical reality of the street lamp from her own eyes and the emotional vocabulary from the poet's mind. How does she extract the elements of design from those two very different things?
She translates them directly into material choices, drawing from her primary observation of those fuzzy, deep blue-gray shadows. She decides to use a dark, heavily textured charcoal linen for her base fabric.
Oh, wow, so that single observation has dictated her elements of texture and color.
Yes. Then, recalling the intense warmth of the street lamp, she chooses to layer that rough linen with pieces of smooth, warm yellow silk.
The contrast there sounds gorgeous.
It is. And finally, she takes the metaphor from the secondary source, the poetry about light actively breaking through or radiating outward, and she translates that into the element of line.
The radiating light.
Exactly. She decides to use thick, radiating embroidery stitches moving outward from the yellow silk across the dark linen, literally representing rays of light piercing the dewy texture.
The transformation there is just incredible. Sheena isn't just staring at a blank piece of fabric anymore, paralyzed by endless choices.
No, she was focused.
She isn't guessing what colors might look nice together. Every single material choice she makes, like the rough linen, the smooth silk, the radiating lines of thread, it is all justified and backed up by the intelligence she gathered from her sources.
Her design process has been given a massive head start. Once you deduce your elements of design from your sources, the heaviest lifting of the conceptual phase is basically behind you. You have your raw materials.
And from our previous deep dives, we know exactly what Sheena's next steps will be.
Oh, definitely.
Once she has deduced her lines, colors, textures, and shapes, she will apply the principles of design, which Pamela Krishnan walked us through in episode 3, to figure out how to arrange those elements harmoniously on her final product.
And she will utilize the knowledge of fashion forecasting we covered in episode 4 to ensure her prospective designer craft product aligns with current apparel and textile trends.
See, the entire process builds upon itself, but it all hinges on that initial gathering phase.
It really does. And this highlights why it is absolutely imperative for a designer to utilize both primary and secondary sources. You simply cannot rely on just one if you want to answer a design brief successfully.
Why is that balance so critical, though? I mean, if Sheena reads 20 brilliant books on textile design, secondary sources filled with expert knowledge, why isn't that enough to create a winning contest entry?
Because secondary sources and primary sources provide entirely different types of nourishment for a designer's brain.
Different nourishment. Okay, explain that.
Well, secondary sources give you incredible breadth and vocabulary. They show you the history of apparel. They teach you complex structural techniques you could never invent on your own. And they expose you to global motifs.
Right, they prevent you from having to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. But if you only use secondary sources, your work will eventually feel lifeless. It becomes a copy of a copy. It completely lacks your unique individual fingerprint.
And on the flip side, if you only use primary sources, like if you refuse to look at any books or tutorials and only rely on what you can touch in your own room, your work might have a lot of authentic soul, but it will completely lack structural integrity.
That is exactly the danger.
You might unknowingly spend weeks struggling to invent a stitching technique that a secondary source could have taught you in literally 5 minutes.
Yes. The creation of a successful textile product requires a constant active dance between the two. You read a historical text about a specific weaving pattern, that is a secondary source.
Right.
Then you sit at your loom and physically weave it yourself until your hands understand the necessary tension. That is a primary experience.
It is a feedback loop.
You look at a curated photograph of a silhouette, secondary. You drape muslin over a dress form and observe how gravity pulls the fabric in your specific studio lighting, primary. The intersection of what you learn from others and what you experience for yourself, that is where true original design is born.
Well, Sheeny is going to submit an incredibly thoughtful, well-researched, and deeply personal entry to that international contest.
I think she has a very good chance of winning.
I think so too. And for you listening, I hope this journey has completely reframed how you look at the beginning of a project. You do not need to wait for inspiration to strike. You just need to start looking, gathering, and extracting.
Just get moving.
Exactly. I want to remind you that this insightful look into the design process was brought to you by omemy.com. Remember that is spelled O-M-E-M-Y.campaign and pronounced O-M-E-M-I-Y.came. We highly encourage you to visit their site to read this whole story at your leisure. It is packed with resources to help you bridge the gap between beginner and master.
It really is a vital platform for anyone serious about improving their craft.
And please remember our second invitation. If you want to continue this conversation, join the Devi the Curious WhatsApp community. Just scan the QR code on the poster for this show. We would be absolutely thrilled to welcome you.
It is a great community. Come say hi.
Yes, please do. We also want to hear from you directly. Please post in the comment box about the topics you would love to hear us unpack next. What part of the design process is confusing you? Let us know.
We read all the comments.
We really do. We have to wrap up today's session here, but we will come back with more such content, so follow our podcast and stay tuned. But before we let you go, our expert has one last thought for you to carry into your studio.
Yes, I do. So we spent our time today talking about finding primary inspiration in obviously beautiful or dramatic things, like an autumn storm, a glowing street lamp, or a 200-year-old museum quilt.
The glamorous stuff.
Right, the glamorous stuff. But I want you to consider the utterly mundane routines of your life.
Mundane. Like what?
Think about the layout of the grocery store you navigate every single week. Or the specific repetitive way you arrange your living room furniture so you can easily reach your coffee cup.
That is interesting.
How are these mundane, repetitive physical routines secretly acting as primary design sources? How are they subtly shaping your inherent subconscious sense of spatial arrangement, line, and silhouette without you even realizing it? Pay attention to your ordinary routines because they might just hold the structural inspiration for your next great design.